Good morning, everyone, and peace be with you all. Thank you for joining us this morning for Interfaith Traditions Supporting Children and Youth During the Holidays in the Midst of a Pandemic. It is certainly an exciting day for many people around the world. This is the first time where the vaccine is actually being delivered to places. And if anyone would have thought that 9 months into this pandemic, we're at this day, I don't think that we would have believed it. It is a beautiful day because we're here, we're together, we're safe, and still, yes, surrounded by so much loss. But today's session is about us and about what we can do to support the children in our lives, the families in our lives, the communities in our lives, as we get through this next season in the midst of this pandemic. I am Ann Williams Isom, and I am the James Dumpson Chair in Child Welfare at Fordham University's Graduate School of Social Services. I was previously the CEO of the Harlem Children's Zone. I am a mother of 3, a wife, a daughter, grew up in Queens, and I am now a resident of Harlem, and I am so happy to be here this morning. I'd like to thank my colleagues, Shirley, the next slide, please, who helped us put together this webinar this morning. Dr. Anita Light, who is with us, Lightburn, who's with us this morning, who is the director of the Beck Institute on Religion and Poverty and has given us so many of our great panelists this morning that you will. Professor at Fordham also, and also the Karanta Chair for Social Justice for Children. And also the people who have helped us in communication, Trish and Kana. I want to give you a shout out for thanking you and getting you to this day. I'd like to now introduce you to the panel that we have here today. It is a distinguished panel, and we are so thankful that they have decided in the midst of this very busy season, I know everybody's very busy, to give us some time and to share some thoughts with us today. We have Imam Latif Khalid. You can see his bio there, so I don't want to read it. He's a university chaplain at NYU, Global Spiritual of Life at NYU, and the executive director of the Islamic Center of New York, senior fellow and co-founder of Many Institute of Multiple Faith Leadership. I saw in that bio that he was in 2009, one of the most influential imams in the country, I think it said. So we definitely want to hear more about that and are very interested in hearing what he has to say as he's been working with young people at NYU. Dr. Donnie, you are out there in Queens where I grew up. Reverend Donald Garner is the youth adult pastor at Greater Allen AME Cathedral in New York, and he's also an associate at the Beck Institute. Thank you so much, Dr. Garner, for being here today. Rabbi Lauren, good morning. Thank you for joining us. You all again can see her bio on the screen. Rabbi Lauren is at the Society for the Advancement of Judaism. And so we are so happy to have her here this morning with us to share some of her thoughts. She said that she doesn't spend that much time with young people, but I told her as the mother of 2, she is an expert as far as I'm concerned. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. Shirley, the next page, please. Next, we have Reverend Marissa. Reverend Marissa, I don't even think I want to try to pronounce your last name. Can you do that for me?
J. Kumar.
J. Kumar, very easy. And Reverend Marissa is the pastor of the of the Methodist Church, Elder-Free Methodist Church, and also the director of the Wings program, a program coordinator. I don't want to get you in trouble by your boss of Lifeway and Network. So you'll talk a little bit more about that, and also an associate at the Beck Institute. And saving the best for last, Father Bob McLaughlin, who is the Catholic chaplain at University Hospitals in Newark, and also a doctoral candidate here with us right now, and an associate at the Beck Center Institute also. Good morning to our distinguished panel. So I said a little bit that we were gonna talk today about our faith traditions. And when I say our faith traditions, what I'm thinking, you all, is what are our anchors, the beacons, our lighthouse that gets us through some of the storms. Under normal circumstances, we're usually going through one storm at a time. Right now, we are going through many storms. And I want you today to help us to reflect on this, on the moment and on the future. So I want to kick us off with the first question, but I want to tell you what happened to me last Thursday. So I am no longer with the Harlem Children's Zone, but I am still on their, they have something called HCZ Safe. So if there's anything going on in the community, particularly around children and their safety, all of us can get and galvanize. And so at about, I think 11 o'clock in the morning, we got a text that said that a 16-year-old was missing. And when I saw his name, they don't put his whole name in it. And they said that he got into an argument with his mom the night before about grades, and that he left the house and they weren't able to find him. And as soon as I saw his name, I recognized it. And I texted the principal and I said, isn't this the young man that lost his uncle and then also his grandfather like 6 months ago? And the principal said to me, first of all, Miss Ann, you have a great memory, but yes, that is. And I said, you all, so when we're thinking about this moment, we've got to put that into the context of his grades, of school, of where he is and what's going on. And so in that context, I really want to ask you all, what are you seeing the struggles and the challenges that the children and the young people that you work with, what are some of the things that they are experiencing right now and that your community is responding to? Anybody want to kick it off? Father Bob?
Yeah, so, I think it's important right from the get-go to say that each of us may have seen and witnessed different things, and your experience is an important one, right? And we need to acknowledge that those are real experiences that people are having. But I would suggest that the first thing we need to do is say that no one person, whether child or adult, is having the same experience, not during this past few months of the pandemic, nor in everyday life experience of the stress and anxiety around them. Whether people are dealing directly with the COVID disease, or if they have already lost someone from the pandemic, or maybe they have been somewhat removed. Maybe they've been social distancing and kind of living a new reality, and that may bring its own anxieties as well. So I think there's a great diversity of experience, and we should be not looking to dismiss anyone's individual experience, but really to acknowledge, affirm that those are real things, and then find ways to concretely connect and cope with those experiences.
I think that's a really good point. Thank you. Reverend Donnie? Oh, sorry, Rabbi Lauren, you can go ahead.
I appreciate that. Thank you. I was going to say, from my experience of watching the families in my synagogue and also from my own children, I find that children are no different than adults in what we're feeling and experiencing. We're all feeling disruption. We're all feeling, and again, to differing degrees, depending on our losses and depending on our closeness to the experiences of COVID and our own, genetic makeup of who we are as humans and how we respond to those. But to some degree, and in every family and every person, there is senses of isolation, there's uncertainty, there's lethargy, there's getting into kind of bad patterns. I know that with my own kids, getting outside is much more difficult than it was 9 months ago because they're used to being inside. And so I think that the truth is, for me, and what I see in my synagogue community and in my own home, is that the kids' experiences aren't that different from the adults. But I think what differentiates the kids and the adults is that the adults have the perspective to say, we have a long lifespan, we can make it through this time. But for kids, they don't have that luxury of being able to see the long view. They're in the moment. They're in the moment, both in terms of their development, but they're also in the moment in terms of their lifespan. So if I'm 44 years old and 18 months of my life is going to be stuck in a pandemic, that's a smaller proportion by a significant margin than a 9-year-old, right? Or a 5-year-old or a 4-year-old.
Yep.
So that really changes I think it's the coping ability that's different, but the realities are the same.
Yes, that's a really great point. Again, who wants to jump in?
I'll go next.
Okay.
Absolutely love what everybody has lifted up so far. I also in my faith community at the Greater Allen AME, I deal not only with the young adults, which is like the 20s and 30s demographic, but I want to lift up an under-examined population, which are the college students. So I also, in my church, I'm over the college ministry alongside my ministry partner. And what I am finding, everyone, esteemed colleagues, is that I'm dealing with dashed expectations of college students, right? Individuals who, were looking, like we have some college, some students who entered into college this semester, and obviously they experienced the greatest disruption, I think, ever, right? They were looking for experience. trying to get away from home, trying to, come into their own. And now, they've had to come back home in many respects, or they're on campus and they're not able to get the quote unquote college experience. Simultaneously, we have, I've worked with individuals who are getting ready to graduate from college, and they are now entering into a world that is more unprecedented, and more uncertain than ever before. And so I would say, in summary, I've been having to really help, college students manage, redirect their expectations. And Rabbi Lauren, you hit it on the nail, in the sense of, a part of having those conversations is talking to them about perspective. So those have been just some of my brief experiences that I've had thus far, with respect to young people.
Um, Reverend Gardner, I want to know if you can come to my house, because I have an 18-year-old that just is in the midst of finals for her first semester of college. And like you said, they're the same population that didn't have a high school graduation. So she's feeling, and this is her life, right? That, oh my God, in 18 years, everything is falling apart. So you will be getting a call from me afterwards. Thank you very much. Reverend Marissa or Imam, Latif, would either one of you like to jump in?
Yeah, so I've recently transitioned from congregational ministry to working at the Lifeway Network, which is an organization that provides safe housing for women survivors of human trafficking, and then education to the general public. So my day job is I work with adults. But I'm the parent of a 5-year-old who is in kindergarten this year, and he's actually in a hybrid model kindergarten. So every other week he goes into school. The other weeks he's home remote, doing remote learning. And I've counted this year, he's had a total of 11 in-person learning days due to the school district starting late, closures due to positive COVID cases, and staff shortages. So I think the constant challenge that we have is how to thrive in remote learning world as a kindergartner. He asks very often to go back to school to see his friends. He often doesn't make it through remote days without needing multiple breaks, reassuring hugs, running around our apartment a couple times, looking out the window, because it's a little overwhelming. And so he needs that reassurance that this isn't going to last forever. He asks why he can't have a sleepover at Grammy's. He asks why he can't go to his cousins to play. A few months ago, he told me he was lonely, and I was very shocked to hear that come from my 5-year-old. So while remote learning has been a huge challenge for our family, juggling working from home and helping him stay on track with school, we're actually really fortunate to have the resources and flexibility with our jobs to make this work, because I know a lot of parents who aren't able to stay home, and our school district gave each student a Chromebook so that they can continue remote learning. So despite everything, kind of what Father Bob had mentioned previously, my son is actually able to learn, make friends on Zoom, on the computer. He's even taking Mandarin at school on the computer. And so as much as of a challenge it's been for us, we know that we're fortunate to have the resources to kind of make it work for our family. And we know that this isn't the case for many families.
Yes. This is a great panel, because we got the college students all the way to the kindergartners, and you're reminding us that we're coping in the midst of this. And so it's a great reminder. Imam, Latif?
Yeah, I mean, just to add to some of what's already been said, definitely working at the university, I would say similar to what Dr. Garner was saying, on the other end of the spectrum, we see a lot of students who have had their senior years and their graduation years disrupted. They don't know what kind of job market that they're going into, really scrambling to figure out how to leverage access to networks that professors might be able to offer, but a very kind of internalized agitation that's rooted in a form of unfamiliarity and uncertainty that they've never experienced before. And I think what we see across a lot of student experiences is that now when they're in a state of instability, the people that they live with, whether that's roommates or guardians, parents, they have a lack of their own self-care strategies, and they're not able to then pass on any type of self-care, right? You can only give to somebody what you possess. And in the midst now of all of these internal anxieties, looking to people who you don't have a choice necessarily, but they're the most apparent role model that you have, and they can't tell you about physical wellness, emotional wellness, mental wellness, spiritual wellness. A lot of it is just absent of empathetic listening and more solution orientation around just trying to absorb people's real stresses and exhaustions. I think building off of that, one of the things in specific that makes it much harder is how social media is informing young people of narratives that are very distinct from their own. So when they see their peers saying, I can't believe I can't go to this restaurant, or I can't believe that I can't have this like movie theater experience, and they're in their heads saying that my father doesn't have a choice but to go to work. Otherwise, we'll lose our health care, or we won't have money to buy food. And I think that creates a sense of isolation that already, with this very pervasive form of loneliness that exists in the prism of modernity, makes it that much harder. I also am the co-founder and a board president of a domestic violence project called Pillars of Peace. We just closed on a building that'll be an emergency confidential shelter for women and children in the New York City area. We saw a huge spike in the number of cases that we were receiving. We had established a fund to provide rapid response cash grants to survivors in the midst of COVID. And the sheer number of applicants that were applying who had children, young as newborns to in their teens, that are now all living at home with their abusers. They're experiencing this in the midst of trying to figure out how to get onto Zooms without technology as public school children, how to balance out college expectations or other expectations, and kind of amplified with the fact that there's somebody who's in their house that does not honor the rights that they have over them and is abusive in every which way possible. And then they see other people living lives very differently. And the last thing that I would say that I've seen in particular with New York children across the board is just a wonder as to why people in other parts of the country are responding to COVID in the ways that they are. I think with April and May being what it is, and you all likely had the same experiences that everyone else has had, hearing sirens throughout all hours of the night, a lot of illness, a lot of death. These young people, their developing hearts are not able to necessarily absorb these adult emotions, but they still have to. And in the process of it, to see now people in other parts of the country where the headlines are hospital beds are no longer available, or, this crisis is happening, or this is happening. And it's, in their minds, why did we go through what we went through and no one else learned from it? And all of that kind of encapsulated in, a very formative period of your identity is lending either towards a lot of loneliness or, on the other end, a lot of resilience, I would say.
Or cynicism.
I was gonna add cynicism. As well. I think having a 13-year-old, my own child, who was raised the very formative years under the last period of our political structure, and seeing what we saw is really is made we were sort of hoping it would build up a sense of social justice, but on the other hand, it also builds up a sense of cynicism, I think, on the other hand. I wanted to echo, thank you for lifting up the voices of women who are abused by their partners, and also acknowledge that there are a lot of LGBTQ kids who are stuck at home with parents and families that are also not supportive.
Right. I mean, you all said so much. Before we go on to that next question, I thought it was really interesting, Imam, the way that you said people are looking, everybody's got this emotion, and then you're kind of looking to your support system in your house to kind of help you, and people can't really help you. They either don't have the skills or they're dealing with their own stuff. And so I think that's kind of what we need to think about in this next question, is what are the supports out there when we're in this very isolated situation where it's manifesting itself, as you also eloquently articulated, in all types of ways, right? And some people are withdrawing, some people are leaning in, some people are working, some people are not working. And so what does that really look like? And so this next question is about what our faith traditions, when you all think about our faith traditions, in what ways can children and young people make meaning of them? And what are some of the supports that we can have in our community to help them? I made a joke at the beginning. I was talking about my 90-year-old mother. And so I don't think in her mind she realizes that she's not going to be able to go to midnight mass this year, because she has always gone to midnight mass. And so, right, she's afraid, and so she can't see her grandkids. Thank God she's with us. But for religion and traditions and the things that are so important to her, feel like each one of them are getting peeled away. I have this feeling that it's not just the 90-year-old mother. I think that it's kids also, and young people. And so let's talk a little bit about that. Who wants to kick us off? Or react to anything else you've heard before, because we have a lot of issues that have been raised.
I could just get us started and say that I think, we're talking about a time period of upheaval, as we've already, begun to uncover, and as we all know, and a time period, and I'm thinking more of the sort of early child, elementary school, middle school, high school kind of age, where everything is up for grabs and everything you knew to be normal is no longer normal. And I think that faith in general, but also our faith traditions, can provide, and I know in our community have provided, a rock of stability in a time where there is no stability. So you can't count on school, you can't count on play dates, you can't count on activities, right? You can't count on all these things that you're used to having, but you can continue to count on your faith community if your faith community has responded well to the pandemic. So, we, just to share, we immediately pivoted to Zoom as a platform within days, and created a lot of programming, moved our entire religious school, which is for kids, through high school, online. We started providing twice a week programming for teens so that they had somewhere to go in the evenings all throughout, basically from the beginning of the pandemic and through the summer. And just creating those online, like, we became the rock and the stability in a time where everything else was unclear. Like, school wasn't clear, but we knew our Hebrew school was clear. Things were, and I think that is a really important thing to be able to give to our families and to our kids, is to say, we're here for you no matter what, and it's not going away. It might just look different, but it's not going away, and we're here, and we're building the community even as we're far away from each other, so that when we're back together, it's like seamless. It'll be a seamless transition.
The power of community.
Yeah, I was gonna say that next. I want to tag what Rabbi Lauren said. This question is so, excuse me, so powerful to me, because it immediately, colleagues, made me think about, at the top of the pandemic, being a young adult pastor, also being, uprooted. I used to be in front of 3,000 to 5,000 people, every single Sunday, to now sitting right here, in my room, teaching the word of God, right? And so the first thing that I had to do as a preacher and as a Christian, as a human, I had to think about what are the core elements that are needed for a person to navigate during this time, right? After heavy discernment and prayer, I realized that I have to spend more time teaching people about perspective raising, right? And so much of my teachings, much of my Bible studies, one-on-one conversations that I had with my young adults, that I still do have with them, is heavily rooted in helping them see that there is another side of this.
Yes.
And so all of the stories from Goshen and so many others was all connected back to this through line of helping people see that there were individuals and there were groups of people who did survive horrendous things, right? And I think I would say, lastly, what just came over me during this time has been about us sharing our testimonies, right? Like, if we don't share what we have endured and what other people have endured, then it's very difficult for our young people to also grab these traditions as well, and even have a audacity to take on new ones. So for me, I believe it was about the content that I was led divinely to start thinking about, which is what inspired, me to even work with young people in developing or enhancing their perspective.
I love that. So the power of faith to kind of lead you and to guide you so that you can have something to share with others. I love that. Thank you. Others?
I think that the pandemic actually gives us the opportunity to reimagine rituals and practices during the holidays. Right now it's Advent in the Christian liturgical calendar. And so right now our sanctuary would be filled with poinsettias and Christmas trees and lights and candles. And it would really be a beautiful kind of spectacle. And it's something that's really meaningful to our church. But now we can't really do that. So it's kind of how do we, the things that are really meaningful about the season and the traditions and the practices we have, how are we able to reimagine them so that they're accessible to us at home? So what I did was I made an Advent wreath for my kitchen table. I bought like a really cute candle holder from Target and I ordered some Advent candles online. And each Sunday night we light a candle together here, like we would at church. So if you're not familiar with Advent, each candle that we light represents something. So hope, peace, love, joy. And it's actually something that we've been doing with my 5-year-old, and he really looks forward to lighting the candles. And we talk about each candle, and I wasn't sure if he really realized what we were talking about or was paying attention. But the first week we lit the hope candle. And we talked about the things that we hope for and the hope that we have in Jesus. And, I didn't really think he was paying attention, to be honest. But at the end of our conversation, I asked him, hey, is there something that you hope for? And he says, I hope that coronavirus ends soon. So I think that for us, the pandemic has been a real tangible way for us to discuss some of these kind of faith concepts and terms that we kind of Christian terms that we bring up all the time. But now we've been able to have this way to kind of describe and say like what the deeper meaning of these things are in a way that my 5-year-old can even understand, sort of. And I use this book, Faithful Families, by Tracy Smith. And so there's a lot of great activities in this book for all ages of kids, Christian activities. My church gave us this book, A Star from Afar, and it came with a little nativity set. And there's this whole kind of activity that you move the star every day, every day of Advent. And then the wise men are supposed to follow the star. And these are all books that you can get offline. They're not that expensive, but they're kind of small little tangible things that we can do to kind of recreate some of that, that Advent kind of story magic that we get when we go to church, but actually bring it home.
First of all, our story was so moving. So thank you for that. And this concept of a real life application and way to teach our young people about faith, right? It's a heck of a moment. And I think that is what faithful people are supposed to do at this time. Imam or Father Bob?
Yeah, I think similar to a lot of what was said already, we at our Islamic Center at Newark University created a lot of virtual programming that had diverse kind of undertones to them. There's about 3,000 Muslim students at NYU. There's close to about 50,000 students overall. And then our center also serves a lot of faculty, alumni, staff, and many people who live and work in the New York City area. So altogether, we estimate we serve about 10,000 people that come from very different backgrounds. And so our programmatic agenda has to have multiple entry points to it that seeks to meet the diverse needs of individuals. And that adaptability to ritual, as was mentioned already, became really critical, where we started to now host distinct services, weekly kind of prayer gatherings to honor those who were ill, those who had passed. But one of the key components into the programming structure, which had spiritual discussions and prayers, but also we were doing how to create a website, yoga during lunchtime, children's story time. You want to start your own business, leveraging the talents of our community in a way to get them engaged so that they were learning from each other, but also felt like they had something to offer. Right from the onset, one of the things that we tried to do that was very important was to also see, how can we be a source of hope for people at this time, right? That we want people to understand their practice of religion as such that good religion brings them to take on societal ailments and illnesses.
Right.
If your practice of religion is not bringing you to do that, then what's really the point of your religion?
That's right.
We launched multiple crowdfunding campaigns that over the course of a few months raised about $3 million from over 40,000 donors. And when you average that out, that's about $75 a person. Nobody's writing like $1 million check, but it's individuals, despite physical separation, coming together through a prism of spiritual connectedness to just help people. And I think that was one of the important values for me to kind of share with our community, as we come together on principles of shared internals, shared values, shared hearts. And when so much around us is showing us how we are connected to each other, and interdependence needs to be something that we embrace, we have to acknowledge that there's a lot of people who just don't want to be connected to anybody else. They don't want to be connected to people of a different race or a different ethnicity or a different class. And that's where it's that much more important for us to introspect and say, well, where do we root like our values and our ethics and are driven by them? And for young people to feel like they're a part of something bigger, that even if it's on a localized level in some capacity, they're still finding a way to live their faith without having to disrupt social distancing and isolation that's put into practice for everyone's benefit. And you can see that it then creates a sense of encouragement. And then we interject an idea that says, what are we going to build right now that we know people will need a year from now, or 2 years from now, or 3 years from now, and start to have those conversations where I think a lot of communities were focused on, this is what we cannot do anymore, and reinforcing that negative kind of framework. We were trying to say, well, what are we going to do in this circumstance? And there's still people that need our support and our help. And it became a very, I think, necessary source of healing as well as inspiration for a lot of people, that they could see themselves be actively involved in a bigger collective. Even if that meant all they were doing was giving $1, they knew it was going to help somebody else who right now might not really have anything else at all.
So we've been talking about a spiritual realm, but in the secular field, all the social workers that are on this call know that there's tons of research that talks about how stress can be decreased by doing something for somebody else. And that very act, when we talk about people protesting over the summer, that was a way of alleviating anxiety and stress and not feeling like you're powerless. So I think you really talked about that. And I also think the focus, Iman, on the future helps people to say like, well, I'm going to get there. I may be in this moment right now, but there is a future that I'm preparing for. So I think that those are very good tips for us. So thank you so much. Father Bob? Yeah,
and I think that's a great bunch of things that not only that Imam said, but Anne, that you picked up on, and that idea of the future thinking, right? I'm blessed at University Hospital. The lead chaplain over there, Helen, is really wonderful about thinking about what do we do next? How do we engage going forward? And certainly during this time when there's been a lack of visitation availability for certain patients from restrictions, developing a virtual visitation that we were able to do with patients when we didn't have that before 8 months ago, was really an incredible thing that we're continuing to develop. And so it's great when you have people who have that kind of foresight to look ahead and at the same time to be grounded in doing the things that you're doing. One of the things that I had been reflecting on coming into today was, my experience after Thanksgiving. Before Thanksgiving, it seemed everyone was like, what are we going to do? We're not going to have the family together. It was sort of, kind of up in the air. What would it even happen? And I know many people were kind of anxiety or kind of provoked a little bit about that. And that's a challenge to get through. But now, hindsight, 2020, of course, we can see we survived. And that experience I had was at the hospital when I was greeting nurses and social workers that I'm familiar with. And I said, how was your Thanksgiving? Almost all of them said exactly the same thing. They said it was good, different, not the whole family gathered around the table, we had to kind of virtually meet, or we had to only kind of social distance, but it was good. And I think that's how we have to perceive what's going to happen, whether you're celebrating Hanukkah right now, or if you're going to be celebrating Christmas or another holiday this season. I think we have to be deliberate and intentional in how we understand what's the real meaning, the essence to the traditions that we have, so that we can do them perhaps even differently, but certainly in a way that kind of captures that meaning, even if it is different. Recently, I've been driving around and noticing that a lot more people seem to have Christmas lights up on their houses than usual.
Yes.
Because they're, because they're home and they have nothing to do, or, whatever it is. My sister called me yesterday. She said, "Do you have any extra lights? We need to put lights on. Everybody on the block has lights but us," so all kinds of upset. And I think it's great if people are putting up the lights and it has tradition and they pass down some meaning and understanding behind that. But if it's just lights to check the box, not unlike your mom, and, midnight mass, for a lot of people, midnight mass is very special. I'm sad to say, for some people, it's check the box. I went to midnight mass on Christmas, right? If we don't understand why we go to midnight mass, or why we go to mass and celebrate it all, then we've sort of missed the whole point of our encounter, to give thanks and to be in the presence of our God, the God who brings light into the world, as we celebrated Christmas. And that's the meaning of those Christmas lights, right? And I think that just like the Christmas lights, and just like how we're going to anticipate celebrating Christmas with our families, we need to understand the essence, the meaning of that tradition, and be able to pass it on. It happens in those kind of interesting conversations, like Marissa was saying she has with her son around the Advent candles, and asking him, what does hope mean to you, and what is he looking forward to? Not assuming what they should hope for, but giving them that opportunity to kind of express themselves, and to really be grounded in that experience. Because perhaps one of the silver linings to this is we sort of take a step back, slow down, and we have to really think about, well, what traditions have we maybe given up on that we should bring back, and understanding that meaning that we can now pass on. And I think, for us, I dare to say we're experts. I'm not. I'm still learning. Always sort of needing to go back and look for references and things, even in my own faith tradition, let alone when I'm, talking to people in other faith traditions. And I think for some parents, that's a difficult area when you start talking about these religious faith traditions to your children, and perhaps you don't know the answer. So you're afraid of what question they're going to ask. Just yesterday, someone was asking me a question about a crucifix and the symbol of the skull and the crossbones on the bottom of the crucifix. They didn't understand, and fortunately I understood. So I texted her back and I let her know what was going on. But all these little traditions that we do, it's more than just signs and symbols, right? The colors, the flowers, all of it really does have meaning behind it. Even that wonderful song, the 12 Days of Christmas, with all the gifts and things, and the very gifts that we share at Christmas, all about symbols that have meaning. And as we're thinking about doing things differently this year, I think it's important to understand those meanings, so we can really capture the essence, the meaning of those traditions, and pass those on. Because hidden in all of those different symbols is that gift that God has given us, is revealing his love to us, that light that breaks through the darkness, and that hope that comes even in these times that are difficult.
Father Bob, you preaching. Did you preach that yesterday? Because that was good.
I'm not going to lie, I rehearsed, So.
You know what? And I'm receiving it fully halfway, because to hold all of those things at the same time, I'm trying to not be like, everything's fine, we're good, God's gonna, and also be like, it's really screwed up, I'm not happy. Yeah. And so,
but I think
Rabbi.
I was gonna add this, that I think that while we're talking about these home traditions and these things, I think that faith is also a container for healing and a container for wholeness. And that is what it should be, right? And the truth is, we can't heal and we can't be whole unless we can be honest about what's going on for us. That's the bottom line. And our faith traditions should invite us. And I know that for me, this feels very Jewish, but I'm sure it's shared in other traditions. It's to hold pain and joy simultaneously, to hold struggle and hope simultaneously. I mean, that is, in my my sense, sort of the essence of what it means to be Jewish and to be a person of faith in the Jewish tradition is to hold those things. And so, if you go back into, you don't have to go, to the Psalms, right? Something shared between Jews and Christians. Yep. You have in one Psalm, you have joy, or you have pain, you have struggle, and you have, fear, and you have also triumph, right? All the human emotions that get captured in any one given Psalm that would be experienced, and that sense of wholeness, and that there's nothing as whole as a broken heart, as it says in the Psalms, yes. That we can bring our broken hearts to God and to our community, and that space, like, we don't have to be okay all the time. Yep. I mean, that is sort of what our American life is all about, which is what we all know, right? As religious people, that I'm sure I share with my fellow panelists, critique of our American kind of approach to grief, right? And our American approach to, loss in our society. Like, okay, you took off a few days of work, we're good, we're back to go, right? And that's not what our traditions teach us, that we need space and time to heal and to be seen fully for where we are. And I think that for us, we've been able to provide, I think the more we can provide a space for people to feel vulnerable and to feel like it is okay to not be okay, that is contributing to the healing of what's going on right now, no matter when we get this vaccine. I'll give an example, two examples. One example is we had our high holidays, which were our version of Christmas. Like Hanukkah is not that different right now. Actually, we're doing more for Hanukkah than we've ever done before. It's become a bigger deal than it ever was. But, we had to reimagine our high holidays, which are this, the equivalent of Christmas or Easter for the Christian community, at least. And it was it was a tremendous undertaking. It was beyond, it was months and months and months and months of planning. But one small thing we did in the middle of that is we invited people into a parenting conversation facilitated by two members of our community who are therapists. And it was called Parenting Fails in the Pandemic. And we enabled people to just talk confidentially, no kids present, about all the times they felt like they failed as parents over the last, 6 months at that point, right? And it was a holy space, because it enabled people to feel like they could truly be where they were, and to feel seen and held and heard and okay being in that space. And then offered compassion there, which was really actually the theme of High Holidays for me this year, was how do we bring ourselves the kind of compassion that we would think God, could provide in the world to ourselves, because we're all struggling. I think as parents, I'll just say as a parent, the struggle is real of my kids are watching too much TV, playing too much video games, not going outside enough, not getting enough exercise, not eating well enough, not getting like on and on and on and on and on. And okay, how do I breathe in compassion? So I think faith as a space to enable ourselves to be whole is a critical piece of this.
I am glad that we are recording this, because I think a lot of people, you guys have given so many nuggets, important for children, but important for all of us who are struggling in one way or the other. There was a question that came in. I'm going to take the question. It's for Imam Latif. I'm going to do a kind of recap of what I think we heard today, and then I'm going to ask you all the last question, which is about what gives you hope. The question that came in, Imam Latif, was any ideas on how to help families in domestic violence shelters with COVID and being displaced? It's for anybody, but I figured I would start with Imam Latif.
I think for the particular individuals who are in shelters, if this is like a more general question on how can one get involved in helping people who are in these circumstances, there are a ton of amazing DV services that are throughout the boroughs. The unfortunate reality is that domestic violence, intimate partner violence, does not discriminate in terms of where and how it impacts people of particular backgrounds, but it's really in any community, people of affluence and influence, people who are wealthy, people who are not, people of all cultural backgrounds, religious backgrounds. And so you can reach out to the city agencies that are built to combat domestic violence, the Office to Combat Domestic Violence, to find referrals of local social service organizations that might be working in your locale that could definitely benefit from your support. I think a challenge that many people have is when they say, I'd like to do something beyond supporting financially. One of the best things you can do to someone who is in need, especially in a circumstance like this, is to actually support them with money and with funds. And when you're working with survivors of abuse, particular agencies are going to have a lot of confidentiality and privilege type policies that might not allow for you to be present in certain spaces, but it's going to be it'll go a very long way in helping people who are very much so in need right now and would very much so benefit from help and assistance. You can also always just shoot me an email. My email is kl442@nyu.edu, and I'm happy to help connect you to different organizations and agencies that are in need of help. A lot of these organizations also work within very shoestring type budgets. And so, with COVID has become also a lot of donor fatigue, not as many like grant opportunities, and where you can be a professional volunteer to help perhaps offer your skill set as a graphic designer, as a web developer, as somebody who understands accounting and bookkeeping, right? Interdisciplinary modes of institutional development and building lend, in my opinion, to really successful services being built out, because we all have our respective skills and training, which also means we're not trained in other fields, but you might be trained in something that is a very necessary skill set, especially right now when people are trying to figure out how to continue the work that they're doing that's very important. You saying, I can give you 5 hours a week or 10 hours a week as a graphic designer, as somebody who will, oversee like grant writing for you, can go a long way. And so, the Office to Combat Domestic Violence, a lot of, social justice centers that the city has set up will have lists of organizations that you could work with in your locales. You can shoot me a message and I'm happy to plug you in. But there's really a lot that's going on there. And then the last piece that I would say on this is that it becomes really important to then get involved civically, and why you want to partake in local elections and get the right people in city council and in these other positions, definitely like for the mayoral race, is because when it comes down to now determining how budgets are allocated and who gets what kind of funding, a lot of the resources governmentally that provide for people of various demographics, beneficiaries that we have responsibility towards, they tend to be very underfunded and they're not really assisted in the ways that they need to be. It's horrendous, the experiences that people have when they're going into the shelter system. And I could tell you a lot of different anecdotes that have been shared with me of individuals now going into spaces that are not secure, dealing with prostitution, drugs, theft, being placed without any real holistic set of services in terms of wellness, social services, mental health, etc. And so to also deal with this issue head on, but preemptively, and think about how do we inform the systems and policies that then dictate the kind of funding and resources that are available for our city's most underserved and underprivileged demographics.
Very good point, because our budgets and our politicians should be a reflection of our shared values. So as we are seeing how things are playing out right now, especially in many underserved communities, and how disparities are playing themselves out, how can our activism and our sense of social justice and healing really reflect into our policy? So thank you for that. I also wanted to say my mom must be on my mind a lot today. My mom was a victim of domestic violence when she came to this country from Trinidad and Tobago. And if it wasn't for the Catholic, my Catholic school, St. Catherine's of Siena, and all of the community organizations, that trauma and that feeling of my mom is not safe, that person that you really depend on. So we didn't talk about trauma today, you all, but there are so many young people in New York City who are experiencing multiple ACEs, adverse childhood experiences. And then when you put the pandemic, when you think about the levels of food insecurity, right? When you think about the economic insecurity, it kind of blows your mind. And so when we talk about the world healing, there's a lot of healing that needs to happen and a lot of trauma that has been put on top of that. So as you all are thinking about your final comments, I want to say that I heard some themes today. I heard this trio, this trinity of hope, connection, and innovation. Father Bob started us off by saying that no one is having the same experience. So it's important for us to listen and not to judge. I really heard this concept of being non-judgmental, him bringing up over and over again. Rabbi Lauren reminded us that the adults are feeling kind of the same thing that our little ones are feeling. And so this idea of checking on ourselves and self-care and being compassionate and finding compassion for ourselves will really help the young people in our lives. Reverend Donnie brought in college kids. And so we got to talk about that, talk about an example of young people who are at a very formative time in their lives and the uncertainty that also is included. And the Imam also clearly brought that up as he's dealing with many young people in college right now that are thinking about getting into next careers and what is that going to look like. Reverend Marissa talked about her 5-year-old, and through the eyes of her 5-year-old helped us to see many different things that they are seeing, that they're picking things up, that he's actually learning. He's going to school, he's learning a different language, he's learning about hope, he's paying attention. And this idea of how can we teach faith right now, you all? How do we take those works and put those works into action? Our faith traditions, Rabbi said, can be a rock for us right now. So are we finding a way to have that be a rock? The Imam reminded us about internalized anxiety that so many of us are feeling right now, and that we're not really able to really get the supports that we need. And so where are those places that we can go and get those supports? The Rabbi reminded us about the power of community and how coming together and having those rituals becomes so important. Reverend Donnie talked about perspective raising, and that's what he has to do right now, and that he prayed on it. Did we talk about prayer today enough? And talk about that we don't have the answers, but the power of prayer to help us figure out how we go through that. The opportunity to witness, we all are witnessing, but remember what Father Bob said, everybody's witness is different, so that's why we have to tell our stories. Activism, we talked, I would say, Imam Khalid talked a lot about activism and the importance of it and how many different ways it could take. The importance of future thinking so we can get there, stepping back. I hate the expression silver lining, but Father Bob really preached a sermon about silver linings and about what we need to do. He told me to tell my 90-year-old mom, don't worry about midnight mass, just remember that she's with her family, that she's safe, and that the Lord is with her no matter where she is. And that faith should be a container for healing, and the Rabbi said to us. And that these things, joy and pain, hope and struggle, reside side by side and always have. And so that can be a source of strength for us. With that little synopsis, what is it that gives you all hope today? What do you want to leave with the audience when we think about moving forward at this moment? Who would like to start?
And just for the record, I didn't say your mother can forget about midnight mass. She just has to celebrate it differently. That's all.
No, I'm going to tell her Father Bob said it, and actually that's going to make it. It's going to be fine. Who wants to kick us off?
I don't mind starting. I think, last week my son was in his remote class and his teacher was going over all the independent work that she had posted for all the kids to do that day and how to access it through Google and all of that stuff. And she told them, if you don't get to everything, that's okay. If you can't finish all this work, do what you can. And I'm on the couch and I didn't realize how much I needed to hear that, that doing my best was enough, and that what I'm doing right now is good enough. And that if I can't get to everything, if I can't celebrate the holidays perfectly, if I can't, send out the perfect Christmas card or have all the answers for my son when he has really hard questions, it's okay. And I think that grace that other people are giving me, but that grace that I can give myself is really what's helping me get through this time. And the second thing is the reminder of knowing that we're not alone. And I think that's the great thing that faith offers us. So, in Christian tradition, at Christmas time, we're celebrating this baby being born, Emmanuel, God with us. We don't have to have all the answers, but I know that I'm not alone. And despite that tension of pain and joy that Rabbi Lauren was talking about, despite the darkness, there is so much light, right? So when I look out and I'm talking to my son about what's going on right now. Yes, there's this scary thing happening right now and there's so much pain, but look at all the helpers. Look at all the people that are innovating and being creative and finding new ways to keep connection. The human spirit is so resilient, and I think that that's really what's inspiring right now. And so when I think about the fact that I'm not alone and that I can live in this tension of joy and pain, and I know that God is with me, and I have a faith community that supports me and loves me and is praying for me, I know that I'm going to be okay.
Thank you. Amen. Thank you so much, Reverend Marissa, for joining us this morning. Who wants to be next?
I'll go next. I've been spending the latter half of this time in a series on Jehovah Elroy, God Sees Me, and one of the revelations that has come to me as a result of this series is on. I've been talking a lot about the providence and the sovereignty of God, and one of the things that I've lifted up to my followers is that the sovereignty of God is not designed to spook us. Instead, it's designed to secure us. And so, knowing for me, my hope is knowing that God is still in control, and because I know God is in control, I know that there is provision, on the other side of what we're going through. And so I've had to go all the way back, right, to the genesis of my creator, of my creator, who I profess, and knowing that if God has providence over the earth, which means God is everywhere, God is aware of what is happening, that also means that there is provision stored up for me, and I am still in a protected place. And so I rest on that. I minister that on a regular basis, and I hope whoever is listening, to this conversation will also be anchored in that security, that if our God has all power, all the whole world in his hands, as we used to sing in Sunday school, surely our circumstances are also in the hand of God. And I think that is one of the most safest places to be in the hand of God.
Thank you so much. Amen. Thank you, Dr. Donald, for being here with us today. Who would like to go next? Rabbi?
I'm trying to choose. There's a couple things, but one or two I'll say. There's a prayer that we say in the evenings, acknowledging the transition from day to night, and it's a prayer acknowledging that every day there will be day, there will be night, and there will be day again. And it's just this stunning concept and reminder that no feeling is final, no experience is final. We move through a cycle of pain to light to joy to hope, and all of that together, and we will move through this. We don't exactly know exactly when, although thank God we know more now than we knew before, right? We at least guess and see it, but we will get there, and there is a cycle and there is a rhythm, and things will move, and we will get there. And then the last is just to sort of echoing what Marissa said, but I'll do it in a Jewish way of sharing a very 2-second story. Which is, there's a story that there was a man lost in the woods. It's a Hasidic story. There was a man lost in the woods and he didn't know his way. And then he saw another person. The person was coming towards him. And he says, "Oh my gosh, I'm so happy you're here. Please tell me the way out of this woods. I'm lost." And then the second man turned to the first one and said, I'm also lost, but hold my hand and we'll go out together. So we are lost in the woods, but we have each other, and we're going to walk through this, and we will end up on the other side together.
Thank you so much. Amen. And thank you so much, Rabbi Lauren, for joining us. Imam Latif, you want to go next?
Do you mind if I jump in there, Anna?
Sure.
I want to, sorry about that, Imam, but I just want to thank Rabbi Lauren for sharing that, because it gives me a good segue. And I need to also then thank you too, because one of the benefits that I've had this year is that, back in April, you guys had Passover first, and it made a really good segue for me to my parishioners when I was asking them to prepare for Easter. and it's going to be okay. If you guys can do it, we can do it too, right? And the same is happening now. You're doing Hanukkah and maybe differently, but we can do it too. And I think that that's helpful, that we also recognize we're in solidarity in that way. You know, the struggle is for all of us, and depending on our traditions, we're all experiencing it different. And earlier, I forget who it was that said it, but we talked about how, particularly for our kids, our young people, that this is representing a significant part of their time, and they don't have the longer history of other significant challenges / opportunities that have occurred in our time. And you know, maybe some of us who are a little bit older have some more, maybe some others have more. And your mom, right, she's lived through all kinds of things, and
Yep.
could pass on stories of the challenges of the Great Depression and other things like that. And it adds some color and some difference to the story. It makes it real, right? And I think that you know, as I was growing up, we went to the movies and we saw the movie Annie, and I always remember that movie Annie because it was the first time I remember going to the movie theater, and there was this line around the building, and it was this great story of hope. You know, a young girl who was an orphan, who was out in her luck, and who finds somebody who loves her. And and you know, she sings that wonderful song, "The sun will come out tomorrow." You know, that tomorrow there will be another day. And I think that there's a lot of things that we can use during this time. These movies, you know, Elf tells us the greatest way to spread Christmas cheer is by singing it loud for all to hear, right? And by doing these kinds of these traditions and things, they help us to have that positivity. And I really think I would be remiss if I didn't say, from my own faith tradition, you know, we really you know, we recognize the importance of the place of Mary as the mother of God, and that she, you know, was this young teenage girl who was willing to say yes to God. And sort of as Anne was saying, it doesn't make it better, it doesn't make it easy, it doesn't take away all the challenges. They were certainly there. You know, she still had a trouble finding a place to even to have her child, and then going into the flight to Egypt, and all the other things that were going on, even in those early years, as she was just a teenager and still wasn't certain, wasn't confident, but was willing to say yes and to have that faith. And it brought together, as you were saying, kind of both the struggles and also the positivity, the hope. And I think that it's there that we can learn from her example of faith, and hopefully kind of go through these different encounters, kind of trusting in God that even in the darkness, that light will come, and finding that real meaning, the essence that we can kind of celebrate and especially to pass on to our young people. You know, that love of God came into the world more than 2,000 years ago, and we're still learning how to understand it for ourselves and how to share it better with each other. And perhaps this is yet another way that we're going to learn through the challenge, the opportunity to do that.
Thank you so much, Father Bob, and amen. And thank you for bringing Mary's name into this, Sister Mary's name into this conversation.
And thanks for putting this together and for having us here. This has really been a great thing for many people, I hope.
Well, it was helpful to me. So since I always start with myself, it was helpful to me. It was quite a blessing this morning. Imam, Latif?
You know, one of the things I think that's quite unique about the circumstance that we find ourselves in is that it affords an opportunity to now offer hope in the prism of reality, where I think quite often hope can be very intangible, and unfortunately can also be at times distance from realities that others might experience that we might not ever experience, and make it somehow intangible, idealistic, utopian-esque, and more of an opportunity for, I wouldn't say entertaining, but not educational, or like as a learning tool that informs our decisions and choices going down the line. And I think when you have difficulty, as we've seen in this pandemic, it does afford those realities because there's a lot of revelations that we can have. In my tradition, there's a verse in the Quran that says, لَقَدْ خَلَقْنَا الْإِنسَانَ فِي أَحْسَنِ تَقْوِيمٍ. Essentially that when God created humanity, when God created Adam, you know, he made the human in the most beautiful of forms. And then the verse that comes after says, ثُمَّ رَدَدْنَاهُ أَسْفَلَ سَافِلِينَ. And then we let them fall to the lowest of the low. And it interjects a paradox that within each of us as humans, there's the capacity to be real agents of goodness and beauty and light. as well as the capacity to be real agents of darkness and ugliness,
Mhm.
but you can choose which direction you go in. And so we see a revelation of real beauty in the first responders, the doctors, the pharmacists, the essential workers who are meeting the pandemic at the front lines, who are engaged not in self-interest, but in the common good. I had a doctor in my community who had said to me that, I've never really understood how to live theology and spirituality, and religion is something that I know I am, but not something that I really felt comfortable with. But now as a doctor with all these patients, she said to me that I have never felt as if there was something that I wanted to live my life for to such an extent that I was willing to actually give my life for it. That if somebody else can live better by me sacrificing myself, then I'm going to keep meeting this virus head on if it means I'm going to save a lot of lives. And that's the kind of attitude and mindset that she had of just real selflessness, of whatever it might cause for me, saving more lives is that much more important. And I think you can juxtapose it to a second revelation of real greed and selfishness, policymakers, decision makers who are creating a mode of decision making that affords to meet the needs of the majority and the privileged, quite often at the expense, again, of those who are underserved and underprivileged. We have people who are in New York City who, when you were not in a place where you had to pay rent, their landlords were still asking for money. And when people who didn't have money to give, they were saying, in this mode of real just grossness and ugliness, that instead of giving me money, why don't you give me some physical intimacy
Right.
instead, right? And to get to a place where that kind of degradation exists, it creates now this reality of, well, here's what's good because we understand what's not good. And I think a third revelation that comes is how undeniably yet again we understand that elements of race and class still define who has and who has not. And if that's not something people have learned from this pandemic, then I don't know what else really
Right.
needs to happen. And then a last, which is most important, I would say, is a revelation of the self, that how do we individually respond to all of it? And we take these other revelations and we root a hope in a lived experience that says, I'm going to choose beauty. I'm going to choose to live my faith. I'm going to choose to live goodness. And even if it means I can just help and impact one heart, then I'm going to get it done. My kids, have sat with me. We've had conversations with friends of ours and others to really understand. One is 5, one's turning 8 tomorrow. And we love Elf, the movie, by the way. It's really great. But for them to now try to understand, living in a city as complex as New York, that why is it that some people live in certain ways and other people live in other ways?
Right.
Why is it that we have empty subways in April and May going into Manhattan, in Manhattan, and the streets are empty, but the subways are packed in the outer boroughs throughout this whole process?
Right.
And to create that hope within them and that sense of self, this rooted in realities and not devoid or conveniently leaving out someone else's experiences, which to me, I think is the best form of hope, because we erase a lot of people's experiences quite often. But this now affords an opportunity for us to embrace realities distinct from our own and then inculcate a sense of hope within a younger generation, our children, that doesn't have to pretend like certain things don't happen in
Yep.
order for them to be inspired.
Well, certainly amen to that. You all have lived your faith this morning by giving so graciously to us. We really appreciate it. I was looking at a quote that Reverend King said when he preached the funeral of the 4 little girls at the 16th Street Baptist Church, and I said I wanted to end with it today. It says, God is able to lift you from the fatigue of despair to the buoyancy of hope and transform dark and desolate valleys into sunlit paths of inner peace. I'm wishing you all peace, hope, and much love for this season and throughout the year. Thank you so much, and bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Anne.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
Very nice meeting you all.
Likewise.
Thank you.